The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that almost hurts. A soft, ticking clock echoed through the living room as Grandma Meera sat by the window, her wrinkled hands folded neatly on her lap. The evening light bathed her face in a warm, golden hue, but her eyes carried the shadow of waiting for a voice, a smile, a call that never came. Every night, at the same time, she placed her phone beside the teacup, hoping it would light up with her granddaughter's name. Anya calling, but the screen stayed black. She took a deep breath and whispered, "Maybe she's busy today, maybe tomorrow." But deep inside she knew. Tomorrow was slowly turning into never. Because sometimes the longest waits are for the people who promise they'd never forget you. Every morning, Meera started her day the same way, brewing tea for two, even though she only drank 1 cup. The second cup sat on the table untouched, its steam fading slowly into the still air. She'd smile faintly at it, pretending Anya was sitting across from her, just like old times. "You always took too long to drink, Beta," she'd say to the empty chair, her voice trembling between laughter and ache. The walls were covered with framed photos. Anya's first birthday, her graduation, her wedding. Each picture was a frozen moment of joy, yet they now stared back at her like memories trapped behind glass. She sometimes reached out to dust them, her fingers lingering on the glass, whispering, "You've grown so much without me, because love doesn't fade with distance, it just learns how to ache quietly." In the early days, the calls used to come often. Anya would laugh, showing her new apartment, her new life, her new beginnings. Meera would listen with pride, though sometimes the silence after each call felt heavier than before. Slowly, those calls became shorter, from an hour to a few minutes, then just quick check-ins, and eventually they stopped coming at all. Meera still remembered the last words, "Daddy, I'll call you tomorrow, okay?" That was 6 months ago. Every evening since then, she's been sitting by the window, phone in hand, heart in hope. Sometimes she wondered if she should call instead. But then she'd think, what if she's busy? I don't want to disturb her. So she waited, day after day, night after night. Have you ever waited for someone's message so long that you started memorizing their last words? That evening, the sky outside her window turned crimson, the kind of sunset that used to make Anya squeal, "Daddy, look, the sky's on fire!" Meera smiled faintly at the memory, her heart aching with nostalgia. She reached for her knitting needles and began to stitch a small blue sweater, just like the ones she used to make when Anya was a child. But halfway through, her hands stopped. She stared at the unfinished piece and whispered, "You don't even like wool anymore, do you?" The room grew heavy with silence again. Outside, children's laughter echoed from a neighbor's yard, a sound that both comforted and shattered her. She wished Anya's laughter could fill her home one more time, just once, just enough to make the loneliness quiet down. Because sometimes memories aren't sweet anymore. They sting like the warmth that's gone cold. The neighbors often waved at her, kind smiles, polite greetings, but no one really stayed to talk. They were busy people with busy lives, just like Anya. Every Sunday, Meera baked an extra batch of cookies, hoping someone might stop by. Sometimes she'd carry a plate next door, saying, "Too many for me, Beta, please take some." They'd thank her warmly, promise to visit soon, but no one ever did. The cookies would grow stale by Monday, untouched, like the untouched second cup of tea. She packed them away quietly, whispering, "Maybe next Sunday." That hope, small, trembling, yet stubborn, was all that kept her going. Because deep down, she believed that if she kept her heart open, someone would eventually walk in. Because the hardest part of growing old isn't age, it's being remembered by fewer and fewer people. One chilly afternoon, Meera decided to send Anya a message. Her fingers trembled as she typed slowly on the small screen. "How are you, Beta? I made your favorite kheer today." She waited. The tiny typing bubble never appeared. Hours passed, evening came, and the screen stayed empty. Still, she smiled, convincing herself, maybe she's busy, maybe she'll reply later. The next day, she tried again, "I miss your voice." But again, silence. Every morning, she unlocked her phone and read her own messages, like letters she sent into a void. She never blamed Anya, she just whispered to herself, maybe she's happy, and that's enough. Because sometimes, love is not about being remembered, it's about hoping they're okay, even if you're forgotten. Winter settled in, wrapping the little house in cold and silence. The snow outside sparkled like the stars she once wished upon. Meera spent her days by the heater, wrapped in her old shawl, the same one she wore when she first arrived in America decades ago. Back then, everything was new, exciting, full of dreams. She had crossed oceans to build a better life for her daughter, to give her the education and comfort she herself never had. And now, as she sat alone, she wondered if in chasing those dreams, she had somehow lost her own. "Did I give too much?" she whispered to herself, staring at the steam rising from her cup. "Or did I expect too little in return? Because sometimes the biggest sacrifices aren't made of money, they're made of moments you'll never get back." One night, as the snowstorm howled outside, Meera's phone finally buzzed. Her heart leapt. Anya calling, her eyes welled with tears before she even answered. But as soon as she picked up, it wasn't Anya's face she saw, it was a short, shaky video message. Anya smiled briefly and said, "Daddy, I'm so sorry I couldn't call. Things are crazy here, but I promise, I'll talk to you tomorrow, okay? Love you." And just like that, the video ended. Meera replayed it over and over again that night, memorizing every word, every blink, every breath. "Tomorrow," she whispered softly. But deep in her heart, she feared that tomorrow might never come. Not really, because the most painful words in love are often the simplest. "Tomorrow, I'll call." Days passed. The snow melted, the sun returned, but the call never came. Meera started sitting outside on her porch again, hoping the fresh air might make the waiting easier. Children played in the street, mothers called them in for dinner, sounds of life all around her. But her world remained paused on a promise that never arrived. One afternoon, she watched a young girl video calling her grandmother across the street. Their laughter echoed through the neighborhood, and for a moment, Meera smiled. Then, quietly, a tear slid down her cheek. She whispered, "How lucky she is. Her tomorrow actually came." Because nothing hurts more than seeing someone else living the moment you've been waiting your whole life for. One Sunday morning, Meera decided to cook Anya's favorite breakfast, parathas with extra butter and her special spiced tea. She set the table for two, placed her phone beside the plates and smiled softly. "Maybe today she'll call," she said to herself. The phone remained silent, but Meera kept talking anyway, telling invisible Anya about her garden, the weather, and how lonely the nights had become. At one point she laughed and said, "You always used to steal the crispiest paratha, remember?" Her voice cracked mid-laughter, turning into quiet sobs. She wiped her tears, took a deep breath, and whispered, "It's okay, Beta, I'll keep making them just in case. Because sometimes love keeps cooking for people who may never come home." That evening, the golden light of sunset poured through her window, painting the room in shades of nostalgia. Meera sat on her rocking chair, scrolling through old photos on her phone. Pictures of Anya as a child, covered in flour while helping her make rotis, or wrapped in Meera's shawl, giggling uncontrollably. Each picture was a story, each smile a memory frozen in time. She whispered, "You used to tell me everything, Anya, your secrets, your dreams." When did the silence grow between us? Her eyes lingered on a selfie of Anya with her friends, happy, carefree, glowing. Meera smiled through her tears. "At least you're smiling," she whispered. "That's what matters. Because a mother's heart breaks quietly, not when she's forgotten, but when she's no longer needed." That night, the wind outside whispered softly through the trees as Meera sat by her window gazing at the moon. It reminded her of the nights she used to tell Anya bedtime stories about stars, angels, and dreams that never end. Now, those stories lived only in her heart. She picked up her diary, its pages yellowed with time, and began to write, "Today, I waited again. Maybe tomorrow will be different." The ink bled slightly from her trembling hands, smudging the words, as if her emotions refused to stay confined to paper. She wrote until her eyes blurred with tears, and then she smiled softly, whispering, "At least this page listens when she doesn't. Because when hearts stay unanswered, paper becomes the only friend that truly listens." The next morning, sunlight fell gently across Meera's wrinkled hands as she poured herself a cup of tea. It was the same routine, the same cup, the same chair, and the same silence. But something in her heart felt heavier that day. She walked to the photo frame again, the one of Anya's graduation, frozen in time, full of pride and hope. "You did so well, my child," she whispered to the picture. "I just wish I could have told you that in person." Her voice cracked, carrying both love and longing in equal measure. She sighed, resting her hand on the frame as if it were Anya's face. Because sometimes love echoes loudest in the silence of an unanswered conversation. Later that evening, Meera decided to cook her daughter's favorite meal, dal chawal with a hint of ghee, the way she used to make it when Anya was little. The aroma filled the small apartment, blending with her memories. She placed 2 plates on the table out of habit, one for herself and one that stayed empty. She smiled faintly, remembering how Anya used to say, "Ma, your food tastes like home." But now, home was just a word, not a feeling. As she ate in silence, the ticking clock on the wall seemed louder than ever, counting every second of her loneliness. Because memories can feed the heart, but they can never fill an empty chair. Days turned into weeks, and the phone calls became fewer. Meera still waited by the phone every night, her heart fluttering with hope whenever it rang, even if it was just a telemarketer. She had started talking to the television just to fill the silence, pretending the anchors were her family. Sometimes she would laugh at old sitcoms, only to burst into tears moments later. One night, as rain tapped softly on her window, she whispered to herself, "I raised a daughter who wanted the world, but I never realized the world would take her away from me." Her eyes glistened under the dim light, her voice trembling with both love and longing. Because the hardest part isn't being alone, it's waiting for someone who has already moved on. One Sunday morning, Meera decided to go for a walk, something she hadn't done in months. The streets were quiet, blanketed in autumn leaves that crunched softly beneath her worn shoes. She stopped by a park where families were laughing, children running around, grandparents pushing strollers. Watching them, she felt both warmth and ache. Warmth for the beauty of togetherness, and ache for what she no longer had. She sat on a bench, clutching her shawl tightly, whispering, "Maybe this is how life teaches us, by giving us everything once and then taking it away slowly." A little girl ran past her, giggling, and for a brief moment, Meera saw her granddaughter's face in that smile. Because sometimes, strangers remind us of the love we've been missing for years. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the Tennessee hills, Meera sat by her window with a cup of lukewarm tea. She stared at the sky painted in shades of orange and purple, whispering softly, "I wonder if they ever look at the same sky and think of me." Her voice broke as she said it. The sound of the wind brushing against her curtains felt like an answer, gentle, wordless, almost comforting. She closed her eyes and imagined her family's laughter echoing through the house once more. For a fleeting moment, she wasn't alone. She was surrounded by love that only existed in memories, because even when people forget you, the sky never does. The next morning, Meera woke up early and decided to clean her home. Every corner, every frame, every shelf covered in the dust of time. As she wiped the old photo of her daughter holding her as a baby, her trembling fingers stopped. Tears rolled down her wrinkled cheeks as she whispered, "You promised you'd call every night, Beta. I'm still waiting." She placed the photo back gently and sat beside it for hours, lost in thought. The ticking clock and the distant hum of cars outside were her only company. She smiled faintly and said, "Maybe love doesn't fade. Maybe it just gets quieter." Because sometimes silence isn't empty, it's full of all the words left unsaid. One night, Meera finally gathered the courage to record a message for her granddaughter, her voice shaky but filled with love. "My sweet girl," she began softly, "Grandma misses you every day. I still keep your drawings near my bedside. You said you'd show me your new school on video call. I'm still waiting for that day." Her voice cracked mid-sentence, but she continued, trying to sound cheerful. "I made your favorite cookies today. Maybe when we talk next time, I'll show you." She ended the recording and smiled, but deep inside, she knew that message might never be heard. She placed her phone on the table, right next to the untouched plate of cookies, and closed her eyes. Because sometimes, love travels through messages that never get played. Days later, Meera's apartment fell silent. The neighbors noticed her lights hadn't turned on for 2 nights in a row. When they finally entered, they found her sitting in her favorite chair by the window, a soft smile frozen on her face, as if she had finally found peace. Her phone lay beside her, screen still glowing faintly with a missed video call. Her granddaughter had finally tried to reach her, but it was too late. The sunlight poured through the window, touching her gentle hands, as if heaven itself was welcoming her home. And somewhere, maybe, she was finally having that long-awaited conversation, not through screens, but through hearts. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to call someone you love. Don't wait for someday, because sometimes someday never comes. At Meera's funeral, the small church was quiet. Only a handful of people stood there, most of them neighbors who had known her as the kind old lady who smiled at everyone but rarely spoke. As the priest read a few gentle words, Meera's daughter, Anya, walked in hurriedly, her face pale, her eyes red from crying. She held her phone tightly in her hand, replaying the last missed call again and again, whispering, "Why didn't I call sooner? Why?" She looked at her mother's peaceful face, realizing that all those tomorrows she had promised would never come again. The sound of rain began to fall outside, as if the sky itself was mourning with her. Because guilt is the heaviest thing a heart can carry, especially when it's too late to say, "I'm sorry." After the funeral, Anya went back to her mother's empty apartment. Every corner smelled faintly of jasmine and tea, Meera's favorite scent. On the kitchen counter sat the same plate of cookies, now stale but untouched, beside a note that read, "For my little one, when she finally calls." Anya broke down completely, clutching the note to her chest as her tears fell onto the paper, smudging her mother's handwriting. She sat on the floor for hours, surrounded by silence, memories, and regret. Each photo on the wall whispered stories she had forgotten to listen to. The guilt pierced through her like 1,000 echoes of unspoken love, because sometimes the loudest cries come from the hearts we never listened to. That night, Anya sat by her mother's old window, the same one Meera used to sit beside every evening, and opened the voice recordings on her mother's phone. As she pressed play, her mother's soft, trembling voice filled the room. "My sweet girl, Grandma misses you every day." Anya covered her mouth as tears poured uncontrollably down her cheeks. Every word felt like a dagger, tender, loving, but painfully too late. She wished she could reply, just once, just to say, "I love you, Ma." But now, the phone could only play echoes of a love that had already left this world. The city lights outside blurred through her tears, glowing like distant stars of memories she could never touch again. Because nothing haunts us more than the words we never said. In the days that followed, Anya tried to return to her normal routine, work, meetings, and endless phone calls. But nothing felt the same. Every time her phone rang, she froze, wishing it was her mother's name on the screen. One evening, she walked into a grocery store and instinctively reached for her mother's favorite tea brand before realizing there was no one left to drink it. Her chest tightened as she whispered, "I should have visited more. I should have just called." Her daughter, little Emma, tugged on her sleeve and said innocently, "Mama, why are you crying?" Anya smiled weakly, wiped her tears and replied, "Because sometimes, baby, love waits too long, because we only realize the value of someone's voice when all that's left is silence." That night, after putting Emma to bed, Anya sat alone in her living room, staring at the framed picture of her and her mother, taken years ago at the airport when she first left for America. Meera's eyes had been full of pride, but also fear, the fear of distance, of losing connection. Now, Anya finally understood what that look meant. She whispered into the still air, "You were never asking for much, were you, Ma? Just a little time, a little love." Her voice broke as she clutched the frame close to her heart, tears streaming down her face. The sound of her sobs filled the room that once echoed with laughter and promises. Because a mother never asks for the world, just a call, a visit, or to not be forgotten. The next morning, sunlight poured gently through the curtains, touching the photo of Meera on the table, her smile soft and eternal. Anya sat down with her daughter, holding her little hands tenderly. "Emma," she said softly, "do you know what Grandma always wanted? She just wanted to talk to us, to hear our voices." Emma looked up with innocent eyes and replied, "Then let's talk to her, Mama." Together they lit a small candle by the window and spoke to the sky, telling stories, laughing through tears, as if Meera was listening from above. And maybe, just maybe, she was. Because love never dies, it only changes the way it speaks to us. From that day on, every evening became a ritual. Anya and Emma would sit by the window, just like Meera used to, and talk about their day, sometimes whispering little secrets, sometimes sharing memories. The apartment slowly began to feel alive again, not because Meera was there in body, but because her love had found a new home through their words. Anya started teaching Emma how to cook her grandma's favorite recipes. The dal chawal, the soft rotis, the cookies that once waited for a video call that never came. The air, once heavy with regret, was now filled with remembrance, warmth, and love. Because healing doesn't mean forgetting, it means remembering with love instead of pain. Years later, Emma grew up listening to those stories of a woman who loved unconditionally, who waited endlessly, and who gave everything without asking for anything in return. On her graduation day, she placed a small locket around her neck. Inside it was Meera's photo, smiling softly. As she looked up at the sky, she whispered, "Grandma, we made it." "You're still with us." A gentle breeze brushed her hair, almost like a blessing. Anya watched from behind, tears glistening in her eyes, knowing her mother's love had transcended time. Meera may have left this world quietly, but her story, her love, continued to echo through generations. If this story touched your heart, call your parents or grandparents today. Don't wait for tomorrow's, because tomorrow is never promised, but love can still be shared today. If you felt Grandma Meera's story, please like, comment, and subscribe, so her voice can reach more hearts.